Okay, so I am Jackie White, and this is my individual conflict style presentation for our final. Conflict overall is basically a disagreement or a conversation with incompatible opinions that don't align with each other. This often causes a lot of distress in the relationship that the conflict is between, and that's definitely how it has played out in my life. Throughout growing up, I often witnessed conflict with it between my parents as well as between me and my siblings with themselves. This, like I said before, caused a lot of distress between everybody in my family. Whenever there would be a conflict between us kids or conflict between us kids and our parents, oftentimes it caused a lot of stressful situations between my parents themselves. It caused them to basically argue about what they could do better, what they haven't been doing well enough in order to raise us without being argumentative or disrespectful, however it might be. It definitely, I think a big part of conflict has been played out through my family problems, I guess. I know now as I get older that has shown me a lot about how to handle conflict and how to manage the conflict based off the relationship. I know my parents a lot of the times would try and take the conflict from us children and try to deal with it themselves, which did cause a lot of, like I said, distress and harm emotionally. But overall, they knew that in the long run, taking the stressful conflicts off of our hands as children would help us in our future, which I really do think it has, because of how much we saw growing up and how we saw that it was a really helpful way of dealing with conflict. I think that my style would definitely be avoiding, not avoiding and accommodating. I definitely do avoid in some situations because growing up, I didn't like seeing the conflicts arise and the trouble it caused and the harm it caused in the relationship and the distress throughout all the people involved in the relationships involved. But growing up with that type of lifestyle and experience with conflict, I have definitely chosen to manage my own conflicts throughout my life in an accommodating way. I definitely, when it comes to my friends especially and my family, and then also being older now and working, I've noticed that it has definitely been a big part of with my coworkers and my bosses and friends and family, like I said before, also other peers and students. I choose to put others before me a lot of times. I like to accept their points of view and not argue them so that it kind of eases the relationship and the conversation that we're having. I feel like if I do argue a point, it's going to make the conversation and relationship kind of toxic or move towards silence and violence, like we talked about for the midterm. This definitely, with my friends, I don't want that to happen. Obviously, if it is a big and important topic of conversation or conflict that we're having, it needs to be addressed. If it's toxic, like I said, it needs to be addressed. You shouldn't avoid or accommodate for toxic relationships in your life. So I definitely think that is a big part of my relationships with my friends. With my family, it's kind of both ways. Obviously, growing up, we all experienced the same kind of conflict management and conflicts that we had, as I had 3 siblings and obviously my parents. We use both. I accommodate most of the time, especially when it's with my parents, because I obviously don't want to anger them or make them think of me as like less than before or stop supporting me. A good example is from when I was talking about in my midterm, that conversation we had about protests and Black Lives Matter and violence. I obviously had my own opinions that were both relative and contrasting to my father's, but I kind of accommodated both of our feelings towards the topic because I did not want to make that relationship toxic, because I have seen how that same conversation goes down with others who do have very opposing opinions with my father, and it can create a very toxic and kind of bad relationship, I guess you could call it. That's a big part of how we work in my family, is we definitely don't try to disrespect my parents, because obviously then they will think less of us, and that's just not a good personality trait to have, especially towards the people who raise you all your life. So I definitely try to stay very accommodating and respectful to the conflicts that I do have with my parents. At work, it's very similar, especially with like some people above me, because obviously I've always been a subordinate in whatever organization that I've been a part of. So I always try to stay respectful and accommodative to my bosses as well as my coworkers, because I don't want to create conflicts within the workplace. I think if you create conflicts within the workplace, it looks really poorly on you personally, because you're not respecting the environment you're in and the opportunity you are given to work there. I've always been grateful for every opportunity I've been given, whether it's with school or work or just with like volunteering or anything really. And so I just don't think it's right to create conflicts unless, of course, it's necessary and there's something serious that is going on that you need to address. But I don't think if you're having opposing conversation with somebody else or just like think poorly of somebody else, I don't think you should bring up conflicts that will potentially harm the environment that you're in. Definitely with my intimate relationships, not much experience, but I have been very avoiding and accommodating because of how I don't want them to feel less of me or think less of me, and I always want to keep up that expectation for myself and for our relationship. I definitely do voice my opinions when I'm in an intimate relationship, but I try to do it in a very non-stressful way. I don't want to cause distress in our relationships, and I just don't think that it would be healthy to the relationship to have a lot of conflict. But also, I do believe that when you want to stay in an intimate relationship and you want it to be a strong relationship, you definitely have to voice your concerns. Obviously, as everybody knows, in relationships there can be very harmful and toxic conflicts that occur, which in that case you do need to speak up about. But if I'm having little like sassy moments or like conflicts that I make up in my head, I don't think that I need to voice that. And I think that it's better for our relationship if I don't. And definitely with people of different culture, I think it's honestly very disrespectful to bring up conflicts about other cultures or conflicts based off of varying cultures. So like say I'm talking to someone of a different culture and they think this way of living is right and I think this way of living is right. I don't think it's respectful of me to argue that opinion of theirs, because they are from a different culture and I don't know if that's how they are supposed to live in their culture or whatnot. And so I just think it is very, for me at least, it's very respectful to kind of just accommodate their feelings and their experience with their culture and conflict, and I just don't think it's my place. I definitely think a current conflict that I've had would be the conflict with I had a conflict recently with my mom about school and about my classes, and I think it's necessary for me to voice how I feel about the stress and workload that I've had. I don't think she quite understands exactly how stressful it has been lately, and so I've been kind of using steps of accommodating her understanding as well as my viewpoint and my experience with what's going on to resolve the conflict, as she has been able to understand what I've been saying. So she's been very understanding of my experience and my opinion on how I have been so overloaded with stress and work and school that I can kind of take a step back after these classes. And she didn't understand that at first, because all she thought was important was school and my grades and graduating and keeping my career on path. And so I think me explaining my experience and my opinions on my own emotions and stress levels helped with the conflict. So I definitely think that the accommodating conflict management style of mine has been very helpful in the past, and I know it will be in the future.